A lucky hand. The neon lights of Glitzora's casinos painted the night in strokes of wild color as Jake stepped off the Starliner, his eyes wide with the chaotic beauty of it all. He was a simple guy from Earth, never much of a gambler, but the allure of the famous casino planet was too much to resist. The promise of an evening's entertainment, and maybe a bit of beginner's luck, seemed like the perfect distraction from his mundane job back home. "First time on Glitzora, huh?" A voice chuckled beside him. Jake turned to see a fellow human, a rugged man in his mid-40s with a mischievous grin. "Name's Hank. I could spot a newbie a mile away." Jake smiled, shaking his hand. "Yeah, that obvious?" "Come on," Hank said, clapping a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Let me show you the ropes. This place can be overwhelming." They wandered through the bustling streets, Hank pointing out the best spots for a quiet drink, the loudest gaming halls, and where to find the best food that wouldn't break the bank. Eventually, they ended up at the Silver Nebula Casino, an establishment alive with the sound of slot machines and excited chatter. "This place has the fairest games," Hank explained as they approached a poker table. "Why don't we try our luck here? I'll teach you the basics." Jake hesitated, watching the players. "Sure, why not? I'm here to have fun, after all." They sat down, and the game began. Hank proved a good teacher, guiding Jake through the rules and strategies of poker. As the game progressed, Jake found himself getting into the rhythm of it, his initial hesitation fading away with each round. The game escalated quickly, more players joining with higher stakes. Jake's pile of chips began to grow, much to his surprise and the amusement of Hank. "You've got a natural talent for this," Hank remarked as they entered yet another round. The atmosphere at the table was electric, the stakes now higher than ever. Jake was dealt a hand that made his heart skip, a royal flush. He played it cool, his face a mask of calm as he laid down his cards at the final reveal. The table erupted in a mix of groans and cheers. Jake looked confused at the reaction, until Hank leaned over to whisper, "You didn't just win the pot, buddy." The dealer pushed a pile of chips toward him, along with a small, crystalline token. "Congratulations," the dealer said. "You've won the bonus prize of the evening." Before Jake could ask what that meant, the crowd parted, and a stunning alien with iridescent skin approached the table. She had an ethereal quality to her, her eyes reflecting the casino lights like twin stars. "This is Ilara," the dealer announced. "She's part of the grand prize." Ilara offered a delicate, almost sad smile. Jake stood up, stammering, "There's been some mistake. I didn't know she was part of the game." A hush fell over the crowd as a burly alien with a fierce glare pushed through. "She is mine," he growled. "You won her, but I demand her return." Jake looked from the angry owner to Ilara, his mind racing. He had come for a game, not to claim a person. He realized then that this night could change more than his wallet. It could change his entire life. Hank stood up, placing himself subtly beside Jake. "Looks like you need a bit more help, friend. Let's sort this out together." As the alien's demands grew louder, Jake knew he had to make a decision, and whatever he chose, it wasn't going to be simple. Chapter 2. Claiming Freedom. The tense silence in the Silver Nebula Casino was palpable as the burly alien, whom they learned was named Croz, stepped closer, his eyes narrowing at Jake. "Give her back now, and I might consider letting you leave without a broken limb," he threatened, his voice low and menacing. Jake, feeling out of his depth but compelled by a deep sense of justice, stood his ground. "She's not a prize to be won at cards," he said firmly, meeting Croz's glare. "I didn't know what I was getting into, but I won't just hand her over like she's property." Ilara's eyes flickered to Jake, surprise and a flicker of relief passing through her gaze. Hank, sensing the escalating tension, chimed in, "Look, Maybe there's a way to settle this without causing a scene. Why don't we talk this over somewhere private? Croz grunted, his gaze shifting between Hank and Jake. Fine. But she stays where I can see her. They moved to a quieter part of the casino, a small lounge reserved for private discussions. Ilara sat beside Jake, her posture stiff and cautious. Hank ordered some drinks, trying to diffuse the tension. Once they were alone, Jake turned to Ilara. I'm sorry about all this. I had no idea what was happening. Can you tell me more about yourself and how you ended up in this situation? Ilara nodded, her voice soft but clear. I am from Sylphidia, a planet known for its peaceful inhabitants and our connection to nature. Croz came to our world, promising trade, but instead took several of us as his trophies. I have been trying to find a way back ever since. Jake felt a surge of anger. We need to get her free, Hank. There's got to be some law or something against this. Hank rubbed his chin, thinking, well, the casino authority runs everything around here. If we can prove she was unwillingly placed as a wager, they might intervene. It's a long shot, but it's worth a try. Croz, who had been listening with growing irritation, slammed his hand on the table. Enough. She is mine by law of conquest and chance. You have no rights here, human. Jake met his gaze with a determined look. Then we'll go to the casino authority. Ilara deserves to be heard. Realizing the situation was slipping from his control, Croz sneered. You will regret this. I will have my property back. After Croz stormed out, Hank placed a comforting hand on Jake's shoulder. You're doing the right thing, kid. But we'll need help. I know a few folks who might be able to give us some advice on dealing with the casino authority. They spent the next hours planning their next steps. They contacted Hank's acquaintances, a motley crew of former lawyers and activists who had settled on Glitsara. As they gathered in a dimly lit back room of a nearby diner, the group listened intently to Ilara's story, each person shaking their head in disbelief and sympathy. We'll need to gather evidence and present a case that Ilara was coerced into being a part of the wager, one of the former lawyers, a sharp-eyed man named Marco, explained. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it's possible. As the group dispersed, promising to meet again with whatever information they could find, Jake turned to Ilara. We're going to do everything we can, he promised. Ilara's response was a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Jake. For the first time since I was taken, I have hope. As they walked back to their temporary lodgings under the starlit sky of Glitsara, Jake knew he had stumbled into something much bigger than a night at the casino. But whatever it took, he was committed to helping Ilara find her freedom. Chapter 3. On the Run. The streets of Glitsara were bustling as usual, but to Jake and Ilara, every shadow seemed menacing, every loud noise a potential threat. They had left the diner with a sense of purpose, but now the weight of Croz's threats loomed large over them. Jake glanced at Ilara, noticing her unease. We'll need to be careful, he murmured as they hurried through the crowded alleys. Croz isn't going to wait around while we build our case. You're right, Ilara agreed, her voice tense. He is powerful, and his reach extends beyond what you might expect. As if on cue, a group of rough-looking individuals blocked their path. The leader, a large alien with scarred skin, stepped forward. Croz sends his regards, he sneered, cracking his knuckles. Before the situation could escalate, a voice called out, "Having trouble, friends?" Hank appeared from a side street, accompanied by Marco and two other large figures, both well known in the local resistance movement. The group quickly surrounded Jake and Ilara, forming a protective barrier. "You didn't think we'd let you handle all this alone, did you?" Hank said with a wry smile. The thugs hesitated, outnumbered and outmatched. With a grunt, The leader signaled his retreat. "This isn't over," he spat before disappearing into the crowd. "Thanks for the save," Jake said, clapping Hank on the shoulder. "No problem," Hank replied. "But it's clear you two can't stay out in the open. We've got a safe house where you can lay low for a while." The safe house was a modest apartment hidden in one of the quieter districts of Glitsara. As they settled in, Marco laid out a map, pointing to various locations. "We need to gather evidence and testimonials that prove Ilara was coerced. I've got contacts who can help, but it's going to require moving around the city, and that's risky." "I can help with that," another member of their group, a tech specialist named Theo, chimed in. "I'll set up surveillance countermeasures and secure communications for you. We can't afford any leaks." Over the next few days, Jake and Ilara, along with their newfound allies, worked tirelessly. They met with former slaves who had escaped Kroz's grip, gathering harrowing accounts of coercion and abuse. Each story was carefully recorded and added to their growing dossier. Meanwhile, Theo's expertise proved invaluable. "I've tapped into the casino security feeds from the night you won Ilara," he announced one evening, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "We've got clear audio and video of the entire transaction, including the part where Kroz admitted she was part of the prize. This could be the smoking gun we need." Despite the progress, the constant threat of Kroz retaliation hung over them. One evening, as Jake and Ilara reviewed documents, there was a sudden knock at the door. Jake tensed, but it was only Hank, his expression grave. "We've got a problem," Hank said, stepping inside. "Kroz is getting impatient. He's put a bounty on your heads. It's only a matter of time before more mercenaries come looking." Ilara looked at Jake, her determination clear. "We can't keep running forever. We need to finish this. For me and for others like me." Jake nodded in agreement. "Let's accelerate our plans. We go to the casino authority first thing in the morning." The night passed in restless preparation. As dawn broke over Glitsara, the group gathered their evidence, ready to face the day. "No matter what happens," Jake said, looking around at his allies, "we're in this together." With a collective nod, they stepped out into the early morning light, ready to confront the casino authority and bring Kroz's reign to an end. Their resolve was firm, their cause just, and their spirits united in the fight for Ilara's freedom. Chapter 4. Hidden Sanctuary. The early morning light barely filtered through the dense canopy of the forest where Jake, Ilara, and their allies had sought refuge. The Hidden Sanctuary, a cabin owned by an old friend of Hank's, was nestled on a secluded planet known for its thick jungles and minimal population. As they unpacked their supplies, Marco checked the perimeter, a necessary precaution given the bounty on their heads. "This place hasn't been used in years, but it should serve us well," he said, coming back inside. Hank was setting up a communication blockade with Theo's help. "We should be off the grid here," Hank assured them. "It'll give us the breathing room we need to plan our next steps without Kroz breathing down our necks." Jake and Ilara were sitting at a rustic wooden table, maps and digital pads spread out in front of them. "We've got some time before the hearing," Jake said. "We should use it to strengthen our case and maybe find more allies." Ilara nodded, her focus on a pad displaying legal precedents. "I've been thinking," she began, pausing to gauge Jake's reaction. "We might also prepare for the possibility of appealing to the Galactic Council if the casino authority's decision doesn't go our way." "That's a good plan," Jake agreed, impressed with her strategic thinking. "But let's hope it doesn't come to that." Their discussion was interrupted by Lena's entrance. "I've scouted the area. It's secure, and I found a few spots where we can set up surveillance just in case." "Great job, Lena," Hank said, looking up from his work. "Theo, how's the comm setup coming along?" "Almost done," Theo replied, his fingers flying over a device. "We'll have encrypted channels open within the hour." The cabin buzzed with a sense of purpose as each person tackled their tasks, their collective efforts blending into a symphony of preparation and determination. Later, as the sun reached its zenith, they gathered outside for a brief respite, sharing a meal of local fruits and preserved rations. Sitting on a fallen log, Jake turned to Marco. "How solid do you think our case is?" Marco chewed thoughtfully before answering. "It's strong, especially with the evidence and the testimonies we've gathered. But Kraz has deep pockets and deeper connections. It's going to be about more than just facts." As the afternoon waned, Jake and Ilara took a walk through the dense foliage, their steps soft on the mossy ground. "How do you feel about all this?" Jake asked her quietly. "It's overwhelming," Ilara admitted, her gaze lingering on a flowering vine. "But I feel safer here, with you all. There's something about this place. It's calming." Jake smiled, taking in the serene environment. "It's a good place to think, to plan, and maybe to start over, no matter how this pans out." Their walk led them to a small clearing, where the light filtered through the leaves in golden shafts. "No matter what happens, we've started something important," Ilara said, her hand finding Jake's. "Thank you for standing by me." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Jake replied, squeezing her hand. As they returned to the cabin, the group reconvened, refreshed and ready to tackle the challenges ahead. Theo had finished setting up the communication systems, and Lena had the surveillance in place. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Hank declared. "Let's make sure justice is served, not just for Ilara, but for everyone who's been caught in Kraz's web." The team nodded, their resolve fortified by the solidarity and support they found in each other. The secluded sanctuary had not only offered them shelter, but had also strengthened their bonds, forging them into a united front ready to face the coming storm. As night fell over the jungle, their plans for the future took shape under the starry sky, each star a silent witness to their solemn vow to fight for freedom and fairness. Chapter 5. The Trial. The day of the hearing had arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with tension as Jake, Ilara, and their allies walked into the towering building of the casino authority. The structure loomed large, its sleek metallic surfaces reflecting the early morning light. Inside, the courtroom was a hive of activity. Various species from across the galaxy filled the seats, a buzz of alien languages filling the air. Marco led the group to a reserved area at the front. "This is it," he murmured to Jake and Ilara. "Showtime." Hank, looking unusually formal in a suit, checked his datapad one last time. "We've got everything we need. Just stick to the plan, and we'll get through this." As they settled, a hush fell over the courtroom as the presiding officer, a venerable figure with a long, flowing robe, entered. "We are here to discuss the case of Ilara's autonomy," the officer announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The claimant will present their case first." Kraz's representative, a slick lawyer with sharp features, stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, we argue that the transaction made at the Silver Nebula Casino was lawful under the gaming laws of Glitzara, which include wagers of sentient beings under voluntary agreement." As the lawyer presented his argument, Jake felt a surge of anger, but he held his composure. Ilara leaned slightly towards him, her presence reassuring. Then it was their turn. Marco stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we contest that Ilara was coerced into this arrangement against her will, which is explicitly against the fundamental rights recognized by the Galactic Council." Marco proceeded to lay out their evidence, including the video footage Theo had secured and testimonials from other victims of Kraz's coercion. "Ilara is a sentient being with her own will and rights, which have been grossly violated," Marco concluded, his voice steady and compelling. The officer nodded, then turned to Ilara. "Do you wish to speak on your behalf?" Ilara stood, her voice clear and resonant in the quiet room. "I never consented to be a prize in a game. I seek my freedom, not just for myself, but as a stand against the commodification of sentient life." The courtroom was silent as she spoke, her words resonant with the weight of her plea. After she finished, the room erupted into whispers, her statement clearly making an impact. The officer called a recess before the final deliberations, giving everyone a chance to breathe. Outside the courtroom, Jake and the team gathered in a tight circle. "You did great," Jake told Ilara, admiration in his eyes. Hank patted her on the back. "You spoke brilliantly. No matter what happens next, you've made your mark here today." The group waited anxiously as the officer took his time with the decision. When they were finally called back, the tension was palpable. The officer stood, his expression unreadable. "After considering all arguments and evidence presented, I rule in favor of the claimant, Ilara. She is hereby recognized as a free individual under the law, and her autonomy must be respected immediately." A cheer went up among Jake and his friends, relief and joy mingling in their celebration. Ilara's eyes filled with tears, her relief palpable as she embraced Jake and then Hank. As the crowd began to disperse, Croz's lawyer approached, his face stoic. "We will respect the decision, but my client reserves the right to appeal." "We'll be ready if you do," Marco responded confidently, a slight smile playing on his lips. As they left the courtroom, the group felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had won a significant victory today, not just for Ilara but for others like her across the galaxy. The fight for justice was far from over, but for now they could celebrate this hard-earned victory. Chapter 6. Verdict of the Stars. After the ruling, the group decided to celebrate their hard-won victory at a local eatery known for its cosmic views and exotic cuisine. The atmosphere was buoyant as they settled into a private booth, the expanse of space glittering beyond the panoramic windows. Jake raised his glass first, a smile broadening across his face. "To Ilara, and to freedom," he toasted. "Freedom," the group echoed, their glasses clinking in the dim light. As they sipped their drinks, Hank leaned back, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "You know, I wasn't sure we'd pull this off when we started. Croz's influence is no small hurdle." Marco, ever the strategist, nodded. "It was a tough fight, but the evidence was undeniable. It's a big win, not just legally but morally." Ilara, her demeanor much lighter than it had been in days, looked around at her companions. "I can't thank you enough, not just for today, but for believing in me, for fighting beside me." Jake, who had been quietly listening, turned to Ilara with a sincere expression. "We're not just a team, Ilara. We've become friends. And friends look out for each other." The meal that followed was filled with laughter and shared stories, the joy of the moment bringing them closer. Theo, who had been relatively quiet, finally piped up. "So, what's next for everyone? I mean, we can't just go back to normal after all this." Lena, who had been instrumental in their surveillance operations, shrugged. "Normal is overrated. Besides, I think we've got the makings of a pretty solid crew here." Hank raised an eyebrow, interest piqued. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking about sticking together, maybe taking on some new challenges, then yeah, I am," Lena replied. Marco rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "There's no shortage of people out there who could use our help. Folks caught up in situations like Ilara's. Maybe we've stumbled onto something bigger than us." The discussion turned towards the future, ideas bouncing around the table like pinballs. The possibility of continuing their work, of forming a group dedicated to tackling injustice on a galactic scale, was enticing. As the evening wound down, Ilara took a moment to speak privately with Jake. All of this feels like a dream. I'm free, truly free, and it's all because of you and your friends." Jake smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We all played our part, Ilara. And remember, any time you need us, we're just a call away." Ilara nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "And I'll be there for you too. Always." They returned to the group, ready to plan their next steps. As they left the restaurant, a message alert chimed on Jake's communicator. He glanced at it, frowning slightly. "It's from the Casino Authority. They're asking us to consult on a new case. Seems like our reputation is already growing." Hank laughed, clapping Jake on the back. "Looks like we're already in demand. What do you say, team? Ready for another adventure?" The affirmative responses were instant and enthusiastic. As they walked back to their ship, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, the vast expanse of space a canvas of possibilities. The fight for justice had brought them together, and now, it seemed, it would keep them together, a newfound family forged in the fires of adversity and triumph. Chapter 7. Building a New Life. The hum of the spaceship's engines filled the cabin as Jake and Ilara stared out at the glowing planet below. The 2 moons of Neurodis orbited lazily, casting silver and gold hues over the lush forests and rolling seas. This was their chosen sanctuary, a place to start fresh and build something meaningful. Jake turned to Ilara, his voice calm but excited. "I can't believe we found this place. It feels like a dream." Ilara smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the planet's surface. "It's beautiful. A perfect place to create something better." Their ship landed on a plateau overlooking a pristine valley, dotted with glowing vegetation and gently flowing rivers. Waiting for them were Hank, Theo, Lena, and Marco, who had arrived earlier to prepare the site. A modest structure, built from locally sourced materials, stood as the beginnings of their new venture. "Welcome to paradise," Hank said, grinning as Jake and Ilara stepped off the ramp. "We've got the basics up and running. Power, water, and a sturdy roof over our heads. Not bad for a bunch of outlaws," Jake quipped, shaking Hank's hand. Theo approached, gesturing toward the structure. "It's more than just a house. It's the start of something bigger. I've rigged up a comms hub inside, and Lena's been mapping the area for future expansion." Ilara stepped forward, taking in the scene with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "It's perfect. A place where we can do more than survive. We can thrive." The group spent the next few days settling in, dividing tasks and making plans for the future. Jake and Hank worked on fortifying the main building, their banter making the labor feel less like work. "Pass me the plasma cutter," Jake said, sweat beading on his forehead. "This beam's got to be straight, or the whole wall's going to look crooked." Hank handed him the tool, smirking. "You're turning into quite the carpenter. Maybe you missed your calling." "Maybe," Jake replied with a chuckle. "But I think I'll stick to saving the galaxy for now." Meanwhile, Theo and Lena were setting up solar arrays, their chatter punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. Marco had taken to managing resources and logistics, his pragmatic nature ensuring they stayed organized. Ilara, on the other hand, explored the surrounding terrain, cataloguing the unique flora and fauna. One evening, she returned to the group with a basket of vibrant fruits. "I've been testing these," she announced, setting them down on the table. "They're safe to eat, and delicious." Jake took a bite, his eyes widening. "Wow! This might be the best thing I've ever tasted." As they shared the meal, the group talked about their vision for the future. "This place could be more than just a home," Ilara said. "We could make it a refuge for others like me, people who need a fresh start." Hank nodded thoughtfully. "We'd need to be careful. If the wrong people find out, we could attract trouble." That's why we plan carefully, Marco added. We build it step by step, ensuring we can protect it. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the group gathered around a fire pit outside the cabin. The warmth of the flames and the camaraderie of their shared purpose created a sense of peace they hadn't felt in a long time. Jake turned to Ilara, who was staring into the fire with a serene expression. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. She looked up at him, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. "That I never thought I'd feel this way, safe, surrounded by people I care about. I didn't know it was possible." Jake reached out, taking her hand in his. "It's more than possible. It's real. And we're going to make sure it stays that way." Their connection deepened as they talked late into the night, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet moments of understanding. The rest of the group eventually drifted off to their rooms, leaving Jake and Ilara alone under the starlit sky. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Ilara leaned her head against Jake's shoulder. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "For what?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. "For helping me believe in something again," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "For showing me what freedom can mean." Jake smiled, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "We're just getting started, Ilara. This is only the beginning." And as the new day broke over Neurotis, the valley seemed to come alive with possibilities, a testament to the strength of their bonds and the promise of the future they were building together. Chapter 8. Together Among the Stars. The soft hum of activity filled the valley as Jake and his friends worked on the latest additions to their new home. Over the past few weeks, their secluded haven on Neurotis had transformed from a modest cabin into a thriving base, complete with a communications hub, a garden brimming with vibrant alien plants, and quarters for their growing community. Jake stood on a ladder, hammering the final plank into the framework of a new shelter. Hank, holding the ladder steady below, glanced up with a smirk. "You're getting pretty good at this, Jake. Thinking of switching careers." Jake laughed, stepping down. "I don't think I've got the patience to be a full-time builder. Besides, someone's got to keep us out of trouble." Hank chuckled, handing him a bottle of water. "Fair point. Though I'm not sure you're the best candidate for staying out of trouble." Nearby, Ilara knelt in the garden, carefully tending to the plants she'd brought back from her explorations. Theo and Lena were busy configuring a new energy grid, their voices carrying snippets of technical jargon and good-natured ribbing. Marco approached with a tablet in hand, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "We've had inquiries from 3 different systems," he announced. "People looking for help, for safety. Looks like word of what we're doing here is starting to spread." Jake wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at Ilara. "What do you think? Are we ready to take on more people?" Ilara straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "If we prepare carefully, I think we are. Everyone deserves a chance to feel what we've built here." Jake nodded. "All right. Let's vet them carefully. Make sure they're not bringing trouble with them. We've got something good here, and I don't want to lose it." As the day progressed, the group worked together, sharing ideas and strengthening their vision for the future. By evening, they gathered in the common area, a spacious open-air pavilion overlooking the valley. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, and the twin moons cast a soft glow over their gathering. Theo tapped a button on his datapad, and soft music began to play, the melodies weaving through the night air. "Thought we could use a little ambience," he said with a grin. Hank held up a glass. "To us. To freedom, friendship, and whatever the future holds." The toast was met with cheers, and they settled into easy conversation, their laughter carrying into the night. Jake sat beside Ilara, their shoulders brushing as they watched the others. "You've done so much for this place," Jake said, turning to her. It wouldn't be what it is without you." Ilara smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And it wouldn't exist without you. You brought us all together, Jake. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Jake reached out, his hand brushing hers. "I didn't do it alone. But I'll admit, you make it easy to care." Their fingers intertwined, the touch as natural as breathing. Ilara leaned closer, her voice soft. "You've given me more than freedom, Jake. You've given me a reason to dream again." Jake's voice was steady, filled with quiet certainty. "Then we'll keep dreaming together." The moment stretched between them, filled with the unspoken bond that had grown stronger with every challenge they'd faced. When their lips met, it was a gentle promise, one that carried the weight of all they'd endured and the hope for all that lay ahead. As the night deepened, the group drifted off one by one, leaving Jake and Ilara alone under the stars. They talked quietly, sharing dreams of what their refuge could become and stories of their lives before fate had brought them together. When the first rays of dawn painted the horizon, Jake stood and offered Ilara his hand. "Ready to start the day?" "Start the day." She took it, her smile radiant. "With you. Always." As they returned to the heart of their community, the valley around them seemed alive with possibilities. The friendships they'd forged, the struggles they'd overcome, and the love that had blossomed all came together in this place they now called home. Together, they were building something extraordinary, something that would shine brighter than the stars above.